I just shoveled my lunch and I am excited to keep reading from A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. We are so close to the end and it's really heating up and I didn't want to miss. I have a conflict this afternoon right after school, so I'll post this and we can meet together on Tuesday. We're on page 326, chapter 42. What did you do? Cara said. I don't know. I tripped coming down the stairs from econ. I think I sprained it. Pip fake limped over to her. I walked to school this morning. I don't have my car, she said. Oh, crap. And Mom has a late showing. You can get a lift with my dad, Cara said, slipping her arm under Pip's to help her to her locker. She took the textbook from Pip's hand and placed it on the pile inside. Don't know why you'd willingly choose to walk when you have your own car. I never get used to mine now that Naomi's home. I just felt like walking, Pip said. I don't have Barney as an excuse anymore. Cara gave her a pitying look and closed the locker door. Come on then, she said. Let's hobble out to the parking lot. Lucky for you, I'm Mr. Muscles McGee. I did 9 whole push-ups yesterday. 9 whole ones, Pip smiled. I know. Play your cards right. You might win a ticket to the gun show. She flexed and growled. Pip's heart broke for her then. She'd hoped that whatever happened, Cara wouldn't lose this, her happy, silly self. With Pip propped up against Cara, they staggered up the hall and out of the side door. The cold wind bit her nose and she narrowed her eyes against it. They made their way slowly around the back of the school and toward the teacher's lot. Cara filling the journey with details of the Halloween night movie. Pip tensed every time she mentioned her dad. Mr. Ward was there already, waiting by his car. There you are, he said, spotting Cara. What happened? Pip sprained her ankle, Cara said, opening the back door. Her mom's working late. Can we give her a ride home? Sure, of course. Mr. Ward darted forward to take Pip's arm and help her into the car. His skin touched hers. It took all her strength not to recoil from him. Backpack settled beside her. Pip watched as he climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. So what happened, Pip? He asked, waiting for a group of kids to cross the road before pulling out of the parking lot. I'm not sure, she said. I think I just landed on it funny. I'm sure it'll be fine in a couple of days. She pulled out her phone and made sure it was on silent. She'd had it turned off most of the day and the battery was almost full. Mr. Ward batted Cara's hand away when she started flicking through the radio stations. My car, my music, he said. Pip? She jumped and almost dropped the phone. Is your ankle swollen? He asked. She bent forward and reached down to feel it, the phone in her hand. Pretending to knead her ankle, she twisted her wrist and pushed the phone far underneath the back seat. A little bit, she said, straightening up, her face flushed with blood. Not too bad. Okay, that's good, he said, winding through the traffic up Main Street. You should elevate it tonight. Oh yeah, I will, she said, and caught his eye in the rear view mirror. And then, I've just realized it's a tutoring day. I'm not going to make you late, am I? Where do you have to get to? Oh, don't worry, he said, indicating left down Pip's road. I've only got to get over to Stamford. It's no bother. Phew, okay. Cara was asking what was for dinner as Mr. Ward slowed and swung into Pip's driveway. Your mom is home, he said, nodding toward her mom's car as he pulled to a stop. Is she? Pip felt her heartbeat doubling, scared he'd hear it in her voice. Her showing must have been canceled last minute. I should have checked. Sorry. Don't be silly, he turned around. You need help? To the door. No, she said quickly, grabbing her backpack. Thank you. I'll be fine. She pushed open the car door and started to shuffle out. Wait, Cara said suddenly. Pip froze. Please say she hasn't seen the phone, please. Good luck with your app, she said, drawing it out, the words in an off-key tune. You're going to get in. I just know it. Yes, best of luck, Pip, Mr. Ward smiled. I'd say break a leg, but I think the timing is a little off for that. Pip laughed. So hollow it almost echoed. Thanks, she said. And thanks for the ride. She pushed the car door shut and limped up to the house, her ears pricked, listening to the rumble of their car as it drove away. She opened her front door and dropped the limp. "Hello," her mom called from the kitchen. "Do you want anything to eat?" No thanks," she said, loitering in the entryway. "Ravi's coming over to help me work. Read over my essay one last time before I submit." Her mom gave her a look. "What?" "Don't think I don't know my own daughter," she said, washing mushrooms in the colander. "She only works alone and has a reputation for making other kids cry in group projects. Working? Sure." She gave her that look again. "Keep your door open and submit it already. The deadline is at midnight." "Geez, I will." She had time. She still had time. Just as she was starting up the stairs, a Ravi-shaped blur knocked at the front door. Pip let him in and he called hello to her mom and he followed her upstairs to her room. "Door open," Pip said awkwardly when Ravi went to close it. "Got it. All good with the phone?" he said. She sat cross-legged on her bed and Ravi pulled the desk chair over to sit in front of her. "Yep, it's under the back seat." "Okay." He unlocked his phone and opened the Find My Friends app. Pip leaned in closer and, heads almost touching, they stared down at the map on the screen. Pip's little orange avatar was parked outside the Ward's house on Hillside. Ravi clicked refresh, but it didn't move. "He hasn't left yet," Pip said. Shuffled footsteps moved along the hallway and Pip looked up to see Josh standing in her doorway. "Pippo," he said, fiddling with his springy hair, "can Ravi come down and play FIFA with me?" Ravi and Pip looked at each other. Not now, Josh," she said. "We're a little busy." "I'll come down and play later, okay, bud?" Ravi said. "Okay." Josh dropped his arm in defeat and padded away. "He's on the move," Ravi said, refreshing the map. "Where?" "Just down Hillside at the moment, before the roundabout." The avatar didn't move in real time. They had to keep pressing refresh and wait for the orange circle to jump along the route. It stopped just at the roundabout. "Refresh it," Pip said impatiently. "If he doesn't turn left, then he's not heading to Stamford." The refresh button spun with fading lines. Loading, loading. The page refreshed and the orange avatar had disappeared. "Where'd he go?" Pip said. Ravi scrolled around the map to see where Mr. Ward had jumped to. "Stop!" Pip spotted it. "There! He's heading north up Route 124. They stared at each other. "He's not going to Stamford," Ravi said. "No, he is not." They watched for the next 14 minutes as Mr. Ward drove up the road, jumping incrementally whenever Ravi hit refresh. "He's near New Canaan," Ravi said, and then, seeing Pip's face, "What?" "The Wards used to live in New Canaan before they moved to a bigger house in Fairview, before we met them." "He turned," Ravi said, and Pip leaned in again, "down somewhere called Gravesend Road." Pip stared at the orange dot motionless on the white pixel road. "Refresh," she said. "I am," said Ravi. "It's stuck." He pressed refresh again. The loading circle spun for a second and cleared, leaving the orange dot in the same place. He pressed it again and it still didn't move. "He stopped," Pip said, clutching Ravi's wrist and turning it to her to get a better look at the map. She stood up, grabbed Ravi's wrist, and turning it to a better look. She stood up, grabbed Ravi's laptop from her desk, and settled it on her lap. "Let's see where he is." She opened the browser and pulled up Google Maps. She searched for Gravesend Road, New Canaan, and clicked to satellite mode. "How far down the road did you say he is?" "Here," she said, pointed at the screen. "I think a little bit more to the left." "Okay." Pip clicked the spot and opened Street View. The narrow road was enclosed by trees and tall shrubbery that glittered in the sun as Pip clicked and dragged the screen to get a full view of the area. The houses were on only one side, set back from the street. "You think he's at this house?" She pointed at a small brick house with a white garage door, barely visible behind the trees and a telephone pole. Ravi looked from his phone to his laptop screen. "It's either that one or the one to the left of it." Pip looked up the street numbers. "So he's either at number 42 or 44. "Is that where they used to live?" Ravi asked. Pip shrugged. She didn't know. "You could find out from Cara." "Yeah," she said. "I'm seeing her tomorrow." Her stomach churned. She's my best friend, and this is going to destroy her. It's going to destroy everything. Ravi slipped his hand into hers. It was warm and she felt steadier, holding on to him. It's nearly over, Pip, he said. It's over now, she said. We need to go there tonight and see what Elliot's hiding. Andy could be alive in there. That's just a guess. This whole thing has been a guess. She took her hand away so she could hold her aching head. I need this to be over. I know, Ravi said gently. We're going to end this, but not tonight. Tomorrow. You find out from Cara which address he's going to, if it is their old house. And then tomorrow night we can go there, when Elliot's not there, and see what he's up to. Or we call the police with an anonymous tip and send them that address, okay? But not now, Pip. You can't upend your whole life tonight. I won't let you. I won't let you throw away Columbia for this. Right now you're going to edit your essay, check it over, and submit that application before midnight. Okay? But no buts, Sarge. He stared at her, his eyes suddenly sharp. Mr. Ward is not ruining your life as well. Okay? Okay, she said quietly, remembering that Mr. Ward was an inextricable part of her application too. He'd written one of her college recommendation letters. Good. Ravi pulled her off the bed and into her chair, wheeling her over to the desk and setting the laptop up in front of her. You're going to forget about Andy Bell and Sal for the next 6 hours. That's an order. He traced his fingers across her chin for just a second. Pip looked up at him, at his kind eyes and his serious face, and she didn't know what to say, didn't know what to feel. She was somewhere between laughing and crying and screaming. When Ravi was gone, she opened the Word doc of her essay and read it through. It sounded forced, not like her at all. It sounded like something she thought they wanted her to hear, not who she really was. Be brave, said all the college prep websites. Be honest. So she was. She highlighted her entire essay, pressed delete, and started again. What's wrong with me, she wrote. I might seem like the ideal student, homework always in early, every extra credit and extracurricular I can get my hands on, the good girl and the high achiever. But I realized something just now. It's not ambition, not entirely. It's fear. Because I don't know who I am when I'm not working, when I'm not focused on or totally consumed by a task. Who am I between the projects and the assignments when there's nothing to do? I haven't found her yet, and it scares me. Maybe that's why, for my senior capstone project this year, I decided to solve a murder. Chapter 43. Someone was watching her. She could feel it. Pip turned and found their eyes, a terrified gaze trapped in a plastic stare. With a mechanical groan, the red and white carousel slowly started to turn, and the unblinking horse spun away from her mid-gallop, replaced by another pair of frightened, frozen eyes, and then another. Pip watched the carousel until a carnival worker whistled to his colleague and the horses creaked to a halt. Someone shouted for her to move out of the way as a huge truck pulled up onto the grass. People circling it, waving their arms. The vehicle sighed as it slowed to a stop and folded up. Tilt-a-whirl ride strapped onto its bed. Pip walked on, stepping around the wheel, churned tracks in the grass. Her mom would complain about the damage to the park tomorrow night when the carnival opened, just as she did every year. Pip! Cara's voice sailed over to her from just beyond the bumper cars. Pip followed it, remembering only at the last second to put the limp back into her walk. They were all there, her friends, draped around the bench as they watched the chaos of the emerging winter carnival. It was tradition. I tried to text you, Cara said, running up to her and taking her arm, but then, I remembered you don't have your phone. I do. Cara guided Pip over to the bench, shooing Connor away so Pip could sit. Then she shuffled around in her pocket and pulled out Pip's phone. You were right. You had somehow left it in Dad's car. It was wedged under the back seat. Pip took it. Oh, don't know how that happened. Did you get your app in, Pip? Zach asked. Yeah, just in time, she sniffed. Sent it in 3 minutes before midnight. She had thought she would make it, barely, and had time to read over her essay before she pressed submit, and then, of course, spent hours rereading when it was too late to change anything, then stared at the darkened corners of her room, creating faces out of the shadows, trying to bargain with sleep. Yay, you're free, Cara said, waving Pip's arm in celebration for her. She knew she should feel something, excited or relieved or nervous, but she felt empty, trapped behind a vacant stair like one of those carousel horses. The bench was hard and cold against her back as she feigned a smile. This bench, her bench, Andy Bell taken too soon, and now Pip knew by who. They watched the drop tower ride being set up, its name Downtime wrapped around it in ghoulish font, and then the pirate ship pendulum ride as Connor inserted as many pirate puns into the conversation as possible. Pip felt separated from them all somehow, like she was wrapped in an invisible barrier. Through it, she could hardly hear as Aunt complained that tickets for the Ferris wheel had gone up to $10, or as Lauren admonished him, reminding him it was for charity. A couple of hours later, a truck pulled up with a new ride they'd never seen before. From the distance, it looked like a giant octopus, and her friends stood up to go and get a closer look. Pip didn't move. Go ahead, she said to them, pointing down at her ankle as explanation. I'll stay, Cara said, taking Zach's place on the bench as the others wandered off across the park. How are you? She turned to Pip when they were alone. Fine, she lied. I'm fine, you? Yeah, okay. Naomi? Oh, a bit less than okay, Cara shrugged. Spends most of the day upstairs in her room. She didn't shut her door last night when I got in, and I saw she was writing in her diary again. I guess that's good. It's what the therapist told her to do, you know, the one she's been seeing since Mom. Pip nodded. It was now. She had to ask now or she might not get another chance. Hey, you know my mom's doing a showing of a house on Gravens Road in New Canaan today, she said. Isn't that where you used to live? Yeah, Cara said. How funny. Number 44. Oh, we were 42. Does your dad still go there? Pip asked, making her voice flat and disinterested. No, he sold it ages ago, Cara said. They kept it when we moved because Mom had gotten a huge inheritance from her grandma, and they rented it out for an extra income while Mom did her painting. But Dad sold it a couple of years after Mom died, I think. Pip nodded. Clearly, Elliot Ward had been telling lies for a very long time. She looked at Cara then, really looked at her, and the invisible barrier around her closed in, constricting her throat as she tried to push down the tears. The sadness she felt for Cara was black and twisting and hungry. How was any of this fair? Pip leaned over, wrapped her arms around her friend, and pulled her in. What's this for? Cara's muffled voice in her hair. Nothing. All right, Clingy, Cara said, trying to wriggle free. Pip didn't want to let her go, didn't think she could, but she had to. A distant squeal made her look up, draw back. It was Lauren. Aunt had just jumped out at her from the other side of the incomplete waltzer ride. You know they got together last night, Cara said, nodding her head in their direction. Really? Yeah, and apparently they kissed at the calamity party too. Lauren told me last week. Oh, I had no idea, Pip said. Yet another thing she'd missed lately. Add it to the list. Pip's phone was vibrating in her pocket as the others rejoined them at the bench. Messages from Ravi. Did you get your application in? She didn't open them in case Cara saw anything she shouldn't. It was past 5 when her mom called to say she was waiting in the parking lot. Pip hugged her friends goodbye, her breath stuttering when Cara said, see you tomorrow, because tomorrow might be a different world for them all. She limped away past the bumper cars and the swearing carnival worker who just cut open his hand, past a yellow car towing a hot dog stand in its trailer, and around the corner of the disassembled funhouse where she almost ran into somebody. Oh, sorry, she said, looking up. It was Mr. Ward. The sun flashed across his glasses as he smiled down at her. Ah, Pip, he said brightly. Did you get it? Did you get it in? Yep. Her breath felt gummy, like I was trying to choke her. And your ankle? Not too bad. Should be better by tomorrow. Pip could barely hear her own voice over the sound of her heart in her ears. Surely he could hear it too. Sorry, I've got to go. My mom's waiting. Oh, sure, he said, stepping out of the way. Do you know where Cara is? She's not answering her phone, and I need to drop her home and get over to Target before dinner. Pip pointed behind her. Thanks, Mr. Ward said, nodding to her as he walked away. Pip limped on, checking over her shoulder, watching him. When she crossed behind the bumper cars and could no longer see her, she dropped the limp and started to run. She didn't stop until she reached the parking lot in her mom's car, fumbling for the passenger side handle. Hey, sweetie, her mom said. Starting the engine, she didn't turn to look at Pip, but it didn't matter. Pip saw it anyway. Her mom's red-rimmed eyes. She'd been crying. Pip pretended she hadn't seen, and her mom pretended she hadn't either, talking instead about Josh's sleepover tonight. But Pip knew why she'd been crying. Barney, of course, and how much worse would it be when she found out why he really died? Back home, Pip said, just got to have a nap. I was up late. It was another lie. She went to her room to watch the time, pacing from bed to door and back, waiting. Fear burned to rage, and if she didn't pace, she would scream. Mr. Ward said he was going to Target, the one near New Canaan, and Pip bet she knew where he would be going afterwards. She needed him to be there. When it was after 6 o'clock, Pip tugged the charger out of her phone and pulled on her coat. I'm going to Ravi's for a few hours, she called to her mom. Outside, she climbed into her car and tied up her dark hair on top of her head. She looked down at her phone and the lines of messages from Ravi. She replied, I turned it in, thanks. I'll come to your house after dinner, and we'll phone the police then. Yet another lie. Pip was fluent in them by now. He would only stop her if he knew. She opened the map app on her phone, typed the address, and hit go. The mechanical voice chanted up at her, starting route to 42 Gravesend Road. 44. Gravesend Road was narrow and overgrown, a tunnel of trees pushing in on all sides. Pip pulled onto the curb just after number 40 and flicked off her headlights. Her heart was a stampede, and every hair, every layer of skin was alive and electric. She reached down for her phone, which was propped up in the cup holder, and dialed 911. Hello? 911 operator? What's your emergency? My name is Pippa Fitz-Amobi, she said shakily, and I'm from Fairview. Please listen carefully. You need to send officers to 42 Gravesend Road in New Canaan. Inside is a man named Elliot Ward. 5 years ago, Elliot kidnapped a girl named Andy Bell from Fairview, and he's been keeping her in this house. He murdered a boy named Sal Singh. You need to contact Detective Richard Hawkins who led the Andy Bell case, and let him know. I believe Andy is alive, and she's being kept inside. I'm going in now to confront Elliot Ward, and I might be in danger. Please send officers quickly. Hold on, Pippa, the voice said. Where are you phoning from now? I'm outside the house and I'm about to go in. Oh, okay, stay outside. I'm dispatching officers to your location. Pippa, can you? I'm going in now, Pip said. Please hurry. Pippa, do not go inside the house. I'm sorry, I have to, she said. Pip lowered the phone, the operator's voice still calling her name, and hung up. She got out of the car, following the street down to number 42. She saw Mr. Ward's car parked in front of the small red brick house. The two downstairs windows glowed, pushing away the thickening darkness. As she started toward the house, she triggered a motion sensor floodlight that filled the driveway with a blinding white glare. She covered her eyes, a giant shadow stitched to her feet as she walked toward the front. She knocked 3 times. Something clattered inside, and then nothing. She knocked again, hitting the door over and over with her fist. A light flicked on, and through the frosted glass, she saw a blurred figure walking toward her. A chain scraped from a sliding lock, and the door opened with a damp clacking sound. Mr. Ward stared at her. Dressed in the same pastel green shirt from earlier, a pair of oven mitts slung over his shoulder. Pip? He said in a voice breathy with fear. What are you doing here? She looked him straight in the eyes. He said, I'm just. Pip shook her head. The police will be here soon, she said. You have until then to explain it to me. She stepped 1 foot over the threshold. Explain it to me so I can tell Cara and Naomi, so the Singhs can finally know the truth about their son. All the blood left Mr. Ward's face. He staggered back, colliding with the wall. He pressed his fingers into his eyes and blew out all his air. It's over, he said quietly. It's finally over. Time's running out. Her voice was much braver than she felt. Okay, he said, okay, do you want to come in? She hesitated, her stomach recoiling inside, but the police were on their way. She could do this. We'll leave the front door open, she said, and then followed him in and down the hall, keeping a 3-step distance between them. He led her right and then into the kitchen. There was no furniture in it, none at all, but the counters were laden with food packets and cooking utensils, even a spice rack. There was a small key glinting on the counter beside a packet of dried pasta. Mr. Ward bent to turn off the stove, and Pip walked to the other side of the room, putting as much space between them as she could. Stand away from the knives, she said. Pip, I'm not going to. Move away from them. Mr. Ward stepped away, stopping by the wall opposite her. She's here, isn't she? Pip said. Andy's here. She's alive? Yes. She shivered inside her coat. You and Andy Bell were seeing each other in March 2014, she said. Start at the beginning. It was like he stuttered. He moaned, held his head. Elliot, he sniffed. Okay, he said. It was late February. Andy started paying attention to me at school. I wasn't teaching her. She didn't take history with me, but she'd follow me in the halls and ask me about my day. And I don't know, I guess the attention felt nice. I'd been so lonely since Isabel died, and then Andy started asking to have my phone number. Nothing had happened at this point, nothing at all, but she kept asking. I told her that would be inappropriate, and yet soon enough I found myself in the phone shop buying another SIM card so I could talk to her without anyone finding out. I don't know why I did it. I suppose it felt like a distraction from missing Isabel. I just wanted someone to talk to. I only put the SIM in at night so Naomi would never see anything, and we started texting. She was nice to me. Let me talk about Isabel and how I worried about Naomi and Cara. You're running out of time, Pip said coldly. Yes, he straightened up. And then Andy started suggesting we meet somewhere outside of school, like a hotel. I told her absolutely not, but in a moment of madness, a moment of weakness, I found myself booking one. She could be very persuasive. We agreed on a time and a date, but I had to cancel last minute because Cara had chickenpox. I tried to end things, whatever it was we had at this point, but then she asked again. And I booked somewhere for the next week. The Ivy House Inn in Westport, said Pip. He nodded. That's when it happened the first time. His voice was quiet with shame. We didn't stay the night. I couldn't leave the girls for a whole night. We stayed just a couple of hours. And you slept with her? He didn't say anything. She was 17, Pip said, the same age as your daughter. You were a teacher. Andy was vulnerable, and you took advantage of that. You should have known better. There's nothing you can say that will make me more disgusted with myself than I am already. I said it couldn't happen again and tried to call it off. Andy wouldn't let me. She started threatening to turn me in. She interrupted one of my lessons, came over and whispered to me that she'd left a picture of herself naked hidden in the classroom somewhere, and that I should find it before someone else did. Trying to scare me. So I went back to the Ivy House the next week because I didn't know what she'd do if I didn't. I thought she would tire of whatever was soon enough. She stopped to rub the back of his neck. He stopped to rub the back of his neck. That was the last time. It only happened twice, and then it was spring break. The girls and I spent a week at Isabel's parents' house, and with time away from Fairview, I came to my senses. I messaged Andy and said it was over and I didn't care if she turned me in. She replied, saying that when school started again, she was going to ruin me if I didn't do what she wanted. I didn't know what she wanted, and then, by complete chance, I had an opportunity to stop her. I found out about Andy cyberbullying that girl, and so I called her Dad. as I told you, and said that if her behavior didn't improve, I would have to report her and she'd be expelled. Of course, Andy knew what it really meant, mutually assured destruction. She could have me arrested and jailed for our relationship, but I could have expelled and ruined her future. We were at a stalemate. I thought it was over. I'm going to pause there. We're going to pick up on Tuesday where we left off on page 354. I got to tell you, with just over 40 pages left, this is not over. I'll see you then. Have a great weekend, Ravens, and happy reading.